Something is trying to communicate with you right now. And no, it's not paranoia. It's something far more real and urgent than you can imagine. Your inner guidance is screaming. I'm not talking about the stereotypical angels from religious texts. I'm talking about something entirely different. Something Eckhart Tolle uncovered after years battling crippling depression. A force working through subtle signs that our modern minds write off as mere coincidences. But I need to give you a warning before we continue. What you're about to learn could forever alter how you see your life's events. Some call it spiritual awakening. Others choose to ignore it completely. Have you ever felt that strange premonition that something was wrong just before something actually went wrong? That gut feeling you had last Monday, precisely 3 hours before your boss called you in for that tense conversation. You dismissed it as anxiety. But what if I told you it was a direct warning from your higher consciousness? Let me tell you about Sarah, a 42-year-old marketing executive. For 3 consecutive weeks, she woke up at precisely 3:17 a.m., always the same time. She checked her phone, no notifications. Frustrated, she'd go back to sleep. She thought it was work stress. In the 4th week, she decided to stay awake at that specific time. At 3:17 a.m., her phone rang. It was her father across the country having a heart attack. Doctors later said that if she'd taken 15 more minutes to reach the hospital, he wouldn't have survived. Coincidence? That's what your logical mind wants you to believe. Eckhart Tolle calls this universal intelligence operating through our individual consciousness. But most of us are so disconnected from this frequency that we miss 90% of the warnings we receive daily. Your inner guidance isn't some external entity sending mystical messages. It's your own awakened consciousness, desperately trying to break through the mental noise you've created. And it's screaming because your ego is drowning out its voice with an endless list of worries, plans, and digital distractions. Think of your mind like an old radio. There's a station broadcasting vital information for your survival and growth 24 hours a day. But you're tuned into the anxiety station, playing the same loop of fears and future projections non-stop. The volume is so loud you can't hear anything else. The expanded consciousness, Tolle discovered, is that silent station that's always been there, broadcasting signals and sending warnings, offering guidance. But to tune into it, you first need to lower the volume of the mental drama. Now tell me something. How many times last week did you feel a sudden urge not to do something? Not to take a particular road, not to send a message, not to accept an invitation? And how many times did you ignore that urge and later regretted it? I know exactly how you feel, because we've all been conditioned to trust only linear logic. If it doesn't have a rational explanation, it can't be real. If it doesn't fit the plan, it should be discarded. But what if I told you that this logic is preventing you from accessing the most powerful intelligence there is? Tolle spent years trying to understand why some people seem to navigate life with almost supernatural clarity, while others stumbled from crisis to crisis. The answer he found goes against everything we've been taught about decision-making. There's a difference between what he calls the small mind and the expanded mind. The small mind is that voice in your head that's always calculating, comparing, judging, planning. It operates based on past experiences and future projections. It's useful for basic tasks, but completely limited when it comes to existential navigation. The expanded mind is something entirely different. It doesn't think, it knows. It doesn't calculate. It perceives. It doesn't judge. It recognizes energy patterns far beyond linear understanding. When your inner guidance screams, it uses the language of the expanded mind. Bodily sensations, synchronicity, sudden impulses, recurring dreams, unexpected encounters, feelings that come out of nowhere. It's not that you're imagining things, it's that you're finally paying attention to the right channel. But here's the problem. Our society has trained us to distrust anything that can't be rationally explained. From a young age, we learn that intuition is superstition. That coincidences are just that, coincidences. That strange feelings are signs of mental weakness. And so, systematically, we disconnect from universal intelligence. Let me give you a practical example. You know that feeling of having already lived something before, déjà vu? Conventional science says it's just a glitch in memory encoding, but Tolle suggests something far more intriguing. He says déjà vu is a moment when your individual consciousness recognizes a pattern that your expanded consciousness has already anticipated. In other words, part of you already knew that moment was going to happen. Part of you was already prepared, and the déjà vu is just the echo of that prior knowledge resonating in your linear mind. This means there's a version of you that's constantly a few steps ahead, sending signals back to the present. Warnings about people you should avoid, guidance on opportunities you should seize, alerts about paths that will lead to unnecessary suffering. But if you're always buried in your phone, always planning the next step, always analyzing the previous one, you completely miss these precious warnings. Your inner guidance is screaming because time is running out, not in an apocalyptic sense, but in the sense that every day you spend disconnected from your expanded consciousness is a day lost to intelligent navigation of existence. Think about the last 5 important decisions you made. That job change, that relationship you started or ended, that city move, that financial investment, that argument you chose to have or avoid. How many of those decisions were made from silent clarity? And how many were made from mental noise, social pressure, fear disguised as practicality? I know you know the difference, because when you make a decision from clarity, there's an unmistakable feeling of alignment, as if the entire universe just sighed in relief. It's as if you finally heard the music that's been playing all along. But when you make decisions based on mental chatter, there's always a residual tension, a feeling that something is out of place, that you're forcing a situation that should flow naturally. Eckhart Tolle discovered that this tension isn't accidental. It's literally your expanded consciousness trying to warn you that you're navigating with the wrong map. The thing is, most of us have been taught to trust the map more than the territory, more in planning than in perception, more in control than in allowing. And that's precisely why your inner guidance, your intuition, your higher self needs to shout to be heard. But there is a way to lower the volume of the mental chatter and tune into the frequency of clarity. There's a way to transform those shouts into gentle whispers that guide every move of your life. The first step is understanding that you are not your thoughts. You are not that voice in your head that's constantly commenting, judging, comparing. You are the awareness that observes that voice. And that observing awareness is precisely the point of contact with your higher consciousness. Every time you create space between yourself and your thoughts, every time you can observe the mental drama without identifying with it, you're opening a channel of communication with a dimension of your existence that most people don't even suspect exists. It's not meditation in the formal sense. It's not religion in the dogmatic sense. It's simply the recognition that you are far greater than you imagine, and that this expanded version of you is constantly offering free navigation through existence. But to access that navigation, you first need to stop fighting reality. Stop trying to control outcomes. Stop resisting what's happening in the present moment, because it's precisely in the acceptance of what is that you create space to perceive what is trying to emerge. Your inner guidance isn't shouting advice on how to manipulate reality to get what you want. It's whispering guidance on how to align with what life is trying to offer you. There's a subtle but fundamental difference between these two approaches. The first generates resistance, effort, stress, frustration. The second generates fluidity, synchronicity, unexpected opportunities, organic growth. Tolle spent years trying to understand why some people seem to live in a constant flow of opportunities, while others fought against invisible currents all the time. The answer, he found, will change how you see every challenge in your life. In the next part of this revelation, I'm going to show you exactly how to decode the signals you're receiving every day, how to distinguish between genuine intuition and mental projection, how to transform casual synchronicities into consistent navigation, and most importantly, I'll teach you the specific technique that Tolle developed to silence the mental noise in under 3 minutes, creating immediate space for your inner guidance to finally whisper instead of shout. Because when you learn to tune into that frequency, your entire existence transforms. Decisions become obvious, relationships become deeper, opportunities appear out of nowhere. Problems solve themselves, and it's not magic. It's simply you operating from your complete intelligence instead of a fraction of it. Now take a deep breath, because what I'm about to reveal in the next part goes against everything you've learned about how intuition works. Most people confuse intuition with emotional impulse. They think that gut feeling is always a divine sign. That sudden urge to do something is always higher guidance. But Tolle discovered that there's a crucial difference between 3 types of inner signals. First, there's what he calls emotional reactivity. That's the feeling that arises when something triggers a past trauma. You meet someone new and feel immediate rejection, not because the person is dangerous, but because they subconsciously remind you of someone who hurt you before. This is not intuition. It's conditioning disguised as inner guidance. Second, there's mental projection. This is when your mind creates a narrative about the future and generates corresponding bodily sensations. You imagine catastrophic scenarios about that project at work and feel real anxiety. Your body reacts as if the danger were immediate, but the danger exists only in your imagination. This also isn't genuine intuition. Third, there's what Tolle calls silent knowing. It's a perception that arises without emotional drama, without mental story, without logical justification. It's a clarity that appears complete, as if it had always been there waiting for you to notice. I'll give you a concrete example of the difference. Emily, a 35-year-old teacher, was considering a marriage proposal. Her boyfriend was perfect on paper. Financially stable, affectionate, well-connected with her family. Everyone said she'd be crazy to refuse. For weeks, she was torn. Her mind listed all the logical advantages of accepting. Her heart created romantic fantasies about the future, but there was something deeper she couldn't identify. One night, while washing dishes, the answer appeared, not with drama, not with tears, simply as a knowing that had always been there. She knew without a doubt that she needed to refuse, not because he was bad, but because that path wasn't hers. 6 months later, she met someone she would never have encountered if she had accepted the proposal. Someone who connected with a part of her she didn't even know existed. The difference between silent knowing and mental projection is that the former arises in the presence, without anxiety about the future, without resentment about the past. It's a pure recognition of what is true now. But how do you access this channel of knowing when your mind is constantly creating noise? Tolle developed a technique he calls a presence reset. It's not formal meditation. It's a 3-minute process you can do anywhere, anytime. First minute, locate 5 things you can see around you. Really see. Don't just mentally register. Allow your eyes to absorb the colors, textures, shapes. This anchors your attention in the present moment and interrupts the mental loop. Second minute, locate 4 things you can hear: the air conditioner, the traffic outside, your own breathing, the silence between the sounds. This expands your awareness beyond the limits of personal thought. Third minute, locate 3 sensations in your body: the temperature of your skin, the pressure of your feet on the floor, the subtle rhythm of your heartbeat. This grounds you in your physical experience, further calming the mental chatter. This connects you to the present moment, allowing the whispers of your intuition to rise above the noise, the expansion of your chest with each breath. This reconnects you with your body's intelligence, where genuine signals always appear. At the end of these 3 minutes, ask a specific question about the situation you're facing. But don't ask your mind. Ask the silent space you've just created, and then wait. Not for a dramatic answer, not for a cinematic revelation. Wait for a simple knowing that arises as a quiet certainty. The answer may not come immediately. It might arrive 3 hours later, during a walk. It might come in the form of a synchronicity the next day. It might arrive as a sudden clarity while you're brushing your teeth. But it always arrives, because you created space for it to appear. Now, about synchronicities. Most people think synchronicity is just an interesting coincidence. 2 people thinking of the same thing at the same time. Finding a book about the exact subject you were reflecting on. Receiving a call from someone you just remembered. But Eckhart Tolle realized that synchronicities are actually navigation systems. Confirmations that you're aligned with the natural flow of existence, or warnings that you're resisting something that needs to happen. When you're making decisions from clarity, synchronicities appear as gentle confirmations. Opportunities arise organically. The right people show up at the right time. Obstacles dissolve effortlessly. When you're making decisions from fear or control, synchronicities appear as resistance. Plans are constantly interrupted. Opportunities slip away at the last minute. Misunderstandings inexplicably multiply. It's not that the universe is rewarding or punishing you. It's that you're navigating with different maps. One leads you in the direction of natural growth. The other leads you in the direction of unnecessary struggle. Let me give you a personal example that will clarify this completely. Roberto, a 40-year-old architect, was obsessed with landing a specific project. It was the project of his dreams. Prestige, money, recognition. He had been preparing the proposal for months, but everything went wrong. The client cancelled meetings. Important files disappeared from his computer. The printer broke down on the eve of the presentation. He interpreted this as bad luck. As a test of his determination, after 6 months of constant frustrations, he finally got the decisive meeting. On the way, he got lost because his GPS stopped working. He arrived 45 minutes late. The client had given up and left. Roberto was devastated. Until that same day, he received an unexpected call. It was a former professor offering a completely different opportunity, smaller financially, but aligned with a passion he had abandoned years ago: sustainable architecture for underprivileged communities. He accepted out of desperation, but he discovered that this work connected him to a part of himself that had been dormant for years. The project grew organically. It generated international recognition. It opened doors he never would have imagined. The constant resistance on the first path wasn't bad luck. It was redirection. His inner guidance was screaming, "This isn't the way, you trust the process." But how do you distinguish between resistance that means stop and resistance that means persist? The difference lies in the quality of the energy you feel when you face obstacles. When you're on the right path but facing challenges of growth, there's an underlying energy of expansion. Even when it's difficult, you feel like you're growing, learning, becoming a more complete version of yourself. When you're on the wrong path, the resistance has a quality of contraction. You feel smaller, more limited, as if you're forcing a key into the wrong lock. Eckhart Tolle calls this an energetic compass. It's not about avoiding challenges. It's about recognizing which challenges are expanding you and which are contracting you. And here's the secret that few realize. Your inner guidance isn't trying to make your life easier. They're trying to make your life more authentic. Sometimes this means choosing the harder path, but the more aligned one. Sometimes it means accepting apparent losses that lead to unexpected gains. Sometimes it means trusting processes that your logical mind can't comprehend, because there's an intelligence operating in your life that's much greater than your individual perspective. And this intelligence is constantly orchestrating encounters, opportunities, lessons, growth in ways you only see retrospectively. But when you learn to trust this intelligence, when you develop the ability to distinguish between genuine guidance and mental chatter, something extraordinary happens. You stop fighting the current and learn to navigate with it. Decisions cease to be mental torture and become natural recognition. Relationships cease to be drama and become mutual growth. Work ceases to be an obligation and becomes creative expression. Not because your life becomes free of challenges, but because you develop a fundamental trust that you are being guided by a wisdom that sees far beyond your limited perspective. And then you realize something that changes everything. Those cries that you interpreted as the despair of your inner guidance were actually cries of joy. They were celebrating every moment you finally stopped to listen, every time you chose trust instead of control, every time you allowed life to surprise you instead of trying to force specific outcomes. Because your inner guidance knows something you're only beginning to discover. You're not here to achieve things. You're here to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is far more extraordinary than anything you could achieve. All the frustrations you feel when your plans don't work are actually signs that you're trying to be a smaller version of yourself. All the fears you have about trusting the unknown are actually signs that you're ready to expand beyond the limits you've created for yourself. Your inner guidance was never screaming in despair. They were screaming in expectation, because they know who you are when you stop resisting your own greatness. And now, perhaps for the first time, you know too. The only question that remains is, are you ready to stop fighting your own evolution and start navigating with it? Because the moment you make that choice, the screams transform into whispers. The whispers transform into silent clarity, and the silent clarity becomes the natural soundtrack of your existence. It's a subtle symphony, a gentle hum, always present, yet often unheard, your inner guidance, your intuition, your higher self. They never stopped communicating with you. You just needed to learn their language, to tune your ear to the whispers of your soul, to the quiet knowing that resides deep within. It's not a loud shout, not a booming voice, but a gentle nudge, a subtle shift in your perception, a feeling, a knowing. And now, you've begun to understand the language of your intuition, the language of your heart, the language of Eckhart Tolle's profound wisdom, a language that transcends words, a language written in the silent spaces between thoughts, a language that speaks directly to the essence of your being. This is where true communication begins, a dialogue not of words, but of feelings, of intuition, of that deep inner knowing. This connection, this understanding, is the beginning of a profound and transformative journey, a journey toward a deeper understanding of yourself and the universe you inhabit, a journey that Eckhart Tolle himself dedicated his life to exploring, and one that is now unfolding for you